everybody. Welcome to the next installment of Journey Through John, as we're taking bite-sized chunks of Scripture and we're having a brief discussion, and we're having a challenge at the end in the hopes that this will encourage you, but also challenge you in your walk with Christ. Hopefully this is a great resource for you to get into your Word just about every day. So having said that, we're diving into, Jesus has just been talking about in chapter 13, he's washed the disciples' feet. He's told them that they need to do the same thing with the idea of service. And then now we're diving into the next part of this in verses 21 through 30, where he's talking about one of the disciples that will betray him. Having said that, let's go ahead and dive right in. Verse 21, it says, "After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, 'Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me.' The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. One of his disciples, who Jesus loved, was reclining at the table at Jesus' side. So Simon Peter motioned him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So that disciple, leaning back against Jesus, said to him, 'Lord, who is it?' Jesus answered, 'It is he to whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it.' So when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Then after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, 'What you are going to do quickly.' Now, no one at the table knew why he had said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the money bag, Jesus was telling him to go buy what we need for the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night." This is one of the story of Jesus takes kind of this terrible, sad angle. Certainly people have ridiculed him. People have come against him. People want to kill him. And you say, now it's taking a sad turn? Kind of. Judas is one of the 12. He was one of the guys that was walking with Jesus for the three and a half years as he was doing ministry. And certainly Jesus knew who Judas was from the get-go. But still, he was with him. And so we see Judas, and it certainly seems that Judas has had an issue with greed before. We see this before when Mary breaks the ointment and rubs it in Jesus' feet, and he said, well, this money could have been spent for something else. We see that there's a lot of different pieces to Judas, and probably some things that was working on his heart beforehand. And we see that he's really not focused on who Christ is and walking with Christ and following Christ and being more Christ-like in his walk. He's not looking to Jesus as an example. He's looking at Jesus and saying, hey, I see money. I can make money off of this thing. And so Judas probably doesn't have his heart completely given over to Christ, and it's not really that transformed in this. In fact, you could even look at this and say, if Judas had a struggle, let's say he had a temptation with greed, the temptation itself may not be the evil part, but he's kind of allowed this to get out of hand. He's allowed this to become something more serious. And so what we see with Judas is that as he walked in, if we look at the other accounts of the Gospels, is that he found out that he could get 30 pieces of silver for just merely going up and leading some people up to the garden and kissing Jesus on the cheek. That was all he had to do, and he had 30 pieces of silver. For a greedy man, that's a simple job. And then we see the Pharisees, they had this plan to kill Jesus anyway. They just needed somebody to kind of be that bridge person, and Judas found out that he could be that person. And here we go. And so Jesus knows that this is going to happen. And so he even points it out that Judas says, I know. Go ahead and do what you got to do. And so Judas leaves. The point I think is interesting for us to bring out is that I don't know that Judas was probably all that bad of a person, really. He struggled with greed. We probably all have something we struggle with. We probably all have something that we wrestle with, something that we feel temptation in, and maybe it's a little easier for us to fall into sin that way. For Judas, that temptation was money. And the love of money is the root of all evil, as we see in the Word. Money itself isn't, but that love of money is a problem. And so Judas had this temptation, and he grabbed it. He made a deal. And so I guess the question I want to ask us is, what is it that we allow to have a foothold in our heart? And you might say, well, I would never betray Jesus. Well, I mean, we may not betray him in the sense of what Judas did, but if we allow ourselves to entertain temptation too far, and it draws us off into sin, in so many ways, we kind of are betraying Jesus. We're betraying the fact that we accepted him. We've betrayed the fact that we have decided to walk after him, to follow his example, to pursue holiness, to claim his blood for salvation and so forth. And then if we willingly walk into sin, it very much is similar to betraying him. And so that's a challenge for us. I don't want it to be heavy and guilt-ridden, you're wringing your hands and that sort of thing. But sometimes we do need to have this piece where we're keeping accounts and taking inventory of our heart. And so I think that's the challenge for us today, and that's something that we can wrestle with is what am I allowing to have a foothold and not washing completely away from my heart? Remember, he's just washed the disciples' feet. And he even said that, you know what, you don't need it completely cleaned, but your feet need washed. And maybe in our heart, it's that idea that the temptation is clinging a little bit to us like that dirt is because of all the things we're facing in life. And maybe it's not the fact we've walked away from our salvation, if you will, but it's the idea that we need to say, Lord, there's a temptation that I think is I'm starting to allow to have a foothold in my heart. Would you wash me? Would you purify my heart and lead me in your ways? You're the one I want to follow. I think it's our challenge for today. I hope that encourages you, though. I think there's some things we can do better. And having said that, I hope it challenges you. I hope it encourages you. But I look forward to seeing you again on the next installment of Journey Through John.